Unit 3, Informative Speech. Take 76. Britain's throne. City throne. The difference between ordinary and extraordinary is that little extra. There's a quote by Jimmy Johnson, the head coach for the Dallas Cowboys. And the NFL has been doing that little extra for some time. Fun fact about the NFL and its revenue, the NFL has 29 out of 50 of the richest franchises in all of sports globally. That includes basketball, soccer, any other sport you can think of, hockey going forward. The National Football League is the biggest moneymaker in sports, and it continues to grow not only financially but geographically. But how does it start? I'm going to touch on that and how did it get to where it's at today. The main points is the history of the NFL, the geographic expansion, financial expansion of the league, and the influence of the league that it has today. Now that I've talked about the game plan, I'm going to give you a history lesson on the NFL. So, the NFL started in the 1920s. It originated with 14 teams that were based in Ohio. The most East teams that there were two of them in New York. And after that, we had, in the 1930s, we had the playoff system and an expansion to more teams. Eventually, one NFL owner decided to buy a team and move west, and hence the LA Rams were created in 1946. The LA Rams were actually the first team to draft the first black NFL player. Moving forward, in the 1960s to the 1990s era, the integration of the AFL and NFL happened. Hence your NFC and AFC that you have today. The two conferences that play and represent each side in the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl era was also created, and something called dynasties, as winning dynasties were more established. Teams like the Cowboys, the Steelers, and the Vikings were very prominent in the 70s and 80s. Cowboys also earned the name America's team during that time frame. The NFL was created by a bitter owner who bought a team, missed out on the opportunity to get that team because he didn't buy high enough, and ended up actually making the NFL to go against the AFL. So the AFL was the first league that was created in the 1920s. Going forward, the NFL was created as a rival league. They decided to integrate, which gives us what we have today, ultimately the NFL. Moving forward, 1990s to present day, the Patriots dynasty was something that's prominent. You have Bill Belichick era, a team that has been to the Super Bowl 9 times and won six of them in the 9 times. And then we have a more safety-driven league with Roger Goodell being the new commissioner. Now that I've told you a quick history lesson on the NFL, I'm going to talk about the geographic and financial expansion of the league. So the geographical expansion of the league in the 1920s, like I said, there was about 14 teams primarily located in Ohio. The first kind of expansion was going east in the New York area where the New York Giants were established. Teams like Chicago started happening, the Green Bay Packers, and they started to move more west, hence 1946 when the LA Rams became the team. We then went from 14 teams originally to now present day 32 teams that happens all over the United States, east, west, north, south, and they're split in their own subdivisions. The expansion is not only happening with the teams within the league, the expansion of football is going global. So a lot of games are being played out of the country. In 2005, the NFL decided to host the first out-of-country game in Mexico City. And eventually leading up to this present day, we played in Canada, Europe, and London. So they're trying to make this a global sport. The financial expansion of the NFL, I'll touch on that, is there's teams that are worth so much money. Dallas Cowboys being worth up to $1 billion. And then the Las Vegas Raiders, a newly relocated team, being worth about $383 million right now, and only going to go up from there. So the NFL's revenue compared to other sports, the NFL's top with $13 billion a year, while MLB sits at $10 billion a year, and NBA at $7.4 billion a year. All those billions, which is kind of a shocker considering soccer is the global sport. All the sports in America, basketball, baseball, and football are the top revenue sports, football being number 1. So now that I've informed you about the geographic and financial importance or success of the NFL, we can lastly tackle how much of an influence the league has today. The first big influencer in the NFL would probably be Pat Tillman, in my opinion. Pat Tillman was drafted in 1998 in the 7th round with the 222nd pick by the Arizona Cardinals. He played 1 year football, a couple years football. He was absolutely amazing. And then shortly after the 9/11 attacks, he turned down a $3 million contract to join the U.S. Army, and he was killed in action April 2nd, 2004. The reason why he did that is he saw that there was something horrible going on with the country that he loves and the country that he lives in. He decided to put his job and making all that money to the side and ended up doing something for the better and fighting for his country in a time that the country really needed people to fight for. The second person who had a huge influence being an NFL player would be Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick was drafted in the 2011 draft, second round, 36th pick for the San Francisco 49ers. During the beginning of the 2006 season, he decided to take a kneel during the national anthem, which caused a huge uproar and a split within the country. But the reason of him doing so was because he did not feel he needed to stand for a country that was allowing police brutality to continue and the oppression of black people to continue. In ways that he made a difference, he ended up donating upwards of $2 million of his own money to different charities and organizations to make a difference and solve the problem. As much as I would love to dive into other NFL members, other players that have made huge contributions globally or in pop culture today, I could go on. The list could go on and on, but this brings me to my 2-minute warning of my lecture. My conclusion is we touched on the history of the NFL, the geographic financial expansion of the league, the history, and the influence that the league has on the world. There's always been an argument on which sport is the best, and everyone has their preferences. But there isn't really an argument when it comes to the most successful sport and most popular, and that being professional football. Everything I've touched today explains the growth of the American sport, football, that is continuing to make its mark and continues to gain an even larger fan base and even more revenue. This concludes my speech. Thank you for listening.